There's a narrative around Auburn's linebackers going into 2022, and I'm not so sure that the numbers back that up.
Well, Zach, I actually just finished crushing some chicken farm, and I am freaking ready to rock and roll.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. It is a War Rapport Wednesday. Mike G of the War Rapport hanging out with us as he does every Wednesday. Mike G, we'll talk about recruiting and missing out on Keldric Falk towards the end of the show, but I want to talk about Auburn's linebackers, right? There's a conversation that's been having, I think, all offseason about how folks are expecting more depth at the position, much more of a rotation with the emergence of Cam Riley and potentially Wesley Steiner and Eugene Asante coming in, which I think me and you both are pretty high on what Eugene Asante can bring to the table. And then obviously Owen Pappoe returning. I don't know if we're actually going to see that much of a rotation based off of what we saw last year. And so I want to hear your thoughts on this. So obviously Zakoby, McClain, and Chandler, Wooten, those are the two guys that Auburn is losing. They both played a ton of snaps. Zakoby McClain played a ridiculous amount of snaps, 779 snaps in just 12 games. He sat out the bowl game. And then Chandler Wooten, 701 snaps. He's the only linebacker to play in all 13 games. First off, before we jump any further, Mike G, when you look at that 1,400, almost 1,500 total snaps between the two of them from last season, what is Auburn losing and what can they not replace from what they are losing?
Well, you're losing a ton of experience, and experience is invaluable. So playing that many snaps gives you an edge. It gives you an edge mentally on the field. Players who play that many snaps can play faster. They can play downhill. They can react quicker to things. And, a player who has not had as many snaps may come in and they may be a little slower to react because it is harder to react instinctively to things that you haven't experienced in game speed. Right. So they're going to be losing that from all those snaps. But in terms of the rotations that you talked about, I have to agree. Like, I don't think that we're going to see a heavy rotation at linebacker. I think that they'll make sure that they have their guys nailed down. Zakoby was like, old faithful, man. Right. You need a tackle. You throw him out there. He's going to go get a tackle. And they're going to make sure they have those guys on the field. So if we see any rotation at all, it will be in search of your anchors. But I think we pretty much know Eku Leota and Owen Pappoe are going to be out there. I think Eku earned it last year.
It's a different position though. I mean, Eku is going to be your edge, your pass rusher.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they had him in some stand-up situations last year. Owen Pappoe is a no-brainer if he can stay healthy. Now,
right. So looking at what they're bringing back at linebacker from a snap standpoint, Owen Pappoe, 212 snaps across 5 games. Wesley Steiner, 120 snaps, but played in 8 games last season. Cam Riley, 94 snaps in 9 games. And then Desmond Tisdall, just 5 snaps across 2 games. And so you're going to expect larger roles from those guys, but also the new addition, Eugene Asante. He played 193 snaps in 2021. And he was on pace for a lot more than just dropped off. And we talked about this after they added it, but he essentially just lost the starting job.
Right.
He had 156 snaps in 2020 and just 58 snaps in 2019. So Eugene Asante has some experience. That would put him at second if he had that same amount of snaps. That'd put him ahead of Wesley Steiner behind Owen Pappoe. And so I think it's interesting because you look at what Owen did snaps by game last year, because I think we all think Owen Pappoe is going to be linebacker 1 on this team. And it's just, what are they going to do next to him? So when he was healthy, which sadly wasn't a whole lot, Akron, he played 35 snaps. And for reference, Zakoby played 36 snaps in the Akron game. Alabama State, Owen had 39 snaps. Zakoby had 45. Penn State, 44 snaps for Owen, 56 for Zakoby McClain. So that's kind of the balance, right? And then he did return at Ole Miss, but the balance wasn't the same because Owen Pappoe's performance was not the same. And also, I think they felt more confident in Chandler Wooten at that point of the season. So against Ole Miss, Owen had 58 snaps, Zakoby had 83, and then against A&M, Owen had 36 snaps, Zakoby had 66. So that balance went away once all that once Owen kind of got hurt. But I think that's ideally what they're looking for, don't you, Mike G? A guy that, maybe one guy plays 10% more snaps, but all of the snaps going to two main guys at the linebacker spot.
Yeah, I just don't know that you want a heavy rotation at linebacker. They're not going to treat it like they're going to treat D-line. On D-line, we know they're going to rotate out in and out a bunch of guys to try to keep those guys fresh. Your linebackers, if you've got smart linebackers, a lot of times those guys take on kind of a captain role on defense.
Yeah.
The same way a safety will, from time to time, where they're directing things. And if you're constantly switching a guy in and out of the game, then you're not going to get that. So I don't think that it makes a lot of sense. Again, I'm really going to I think all eyes are going to be on Owen Pappoe to stay healthy and be that guy this year that makes a ton of tackles. The team has raved about his speed and quickness this offseason. He has apparently gone Super Saiyan. He's found that next level of speed. If he can stay healthy and take good angles to the football, he should be that guy. And then you just anchor guys around him to see. You mentioned Eugene Asante. These portal guys, I do think will come in important because outside of Owen, I don't know if anything is solidified. I just think, they're going to be trying things out. They've got a blessing to start the season with Mercer San Jose State. And we'll see how effective everybody around Owen is for the first two games and in the second half of those games. So to try to solidify that rotation a little bit.
Yeah. And I've got more evidence as to why I think it's going to be a 1-2 punch. And whoever wins that job next to Owen is going to get a ton of playing time versus who could potentially be the number 3 linebacker. I'll tell you that in just a moment. Today's show is brought to you by rockauto.com. Look, you can save time and money when using rockauto.com. Why choose to go to the auto parts store and spend way too much money, spend too much time? You got to talk to people. Some people like that more than others. But yeah, why choose to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership when you could just pull out your smartphone, go to your laptop, whatever it may be, and go to rockauto.com. You can go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car, truck, or SUV. And right, Locked On Auburn in there. How did you hear about us box? So they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need. That is at rockauto.com. So, Mike G, after looking at the snaps by game with Owen Pappoe when he was healthy and Zakoby McClain, let's look at what the snap balance was when Auburn had its core main 2 linebackers that it's losing with Zakoby and Chandler for those other games where Owen was not in it. So Georgia State, there's an asterisk next to this one because of the targeting thing. Zakoby wasn't able to play in the first half. So Zakoby played 33 snaps. Chandler played 72. And then LSU, I don't really remember this, but I guess we did a lot of one linebacker stuff against LSU. Zakoby played 74 snaps. Chandler just played 21. And then against Georgia and on, it starts to even out. Georgia, Zakoby had 65. Chandler Wooten had 60. Arkansas, 91 and 88, which is ridiculous. Mississippi State, 81 and 81, which is ridiculous. South Carolina, 56. South Carolina, 56 for both of them. And then for Alabama, they were both at 93. So, I mean, they both really evened out after that once they kind of got into the flow of things. And I think that's going to be what the goal is here because the drop-off, right? I mean, the fact that they felt like they had to play these two guys for 90-ish snaps a game over the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season is telling to me when the guys behind them, Wesley Steiner and Cam Riley, barely broke 100. And to me, like this spring, we heard so many good things about Cam Riley, a ton of good things. A lot of it had to do with physical nature and what he's able to do. I think he's the favorite to win that number 2 job. But to me, I don't think it matters how many dudes are in that room. It's nice to have depth if somebody goes down, but I don't think they want to use more than 2 guys for the majority of this.
Yeah, I don't see the advantage to it. What you want to do is you want to keep your defense off the field so that you do not have to play them. I'm a little shocked at that number for Arkansas last year because I felt like offensively that was a pretty good game. I'm kind of shocked that they played that many snaps for Arkansas like that. While you were talking, I was like 90 something snaps for Arkansas. Let's go back and take
crazy.
a look at that.
Yeah, and that game kind of went the way we wanted it to. So
I would have thought logically that their snaps may have been a little lower in that game because it felt like we moved the ball fairly effectively. But we did have some quick strike drives. I know Bo hit a bomb to Demetrius Robertson in that game. There were some quick drives that may be attributed where we actually scored that attributed to our defense being back on the field there.
And I think Arkansas had some drives too, where like some clock eating drives as well, if I remember correctly. But regardless, whatever. Yeah,
and so I could, if that went that way, that's again that's a little shocking to me. But in terms of snaps, again, I think what this is going to boil down to this year is going to be. I know we're talking about linebackers, but the best way to keep your defense fresh and keep your linebackers fresh is to keep them off the field.
Mm-hmm.
And Bryan Hardin and Auburn football, have said this offseason that they're really focusing on getting this run game going, making Tank a focal point of the attack so that they can burn the clock, own time of possession, and keep the defense fresh. They played a lot better than the positions that we put them in last year. I think that we asked our defense to do a little bit too much, not scoring offensive touchdowns in some games, getting behind a team like Georgia State offensively. There was just a lot of things that we asked them to do last year that probably wasn't a little fair, even against Mississippi State where our offense was going. It was just. I think this year, if we can get the run game going, it's going to be an indirect causality, on linebacker play because those guys have to run and they have to fill gaps. And, hopefully what you see is a stout D line where running backs aren't making it to the next level.
Right.
They're making it to the next level.
Or linemen aren't. And then your linebackers can run free. That was what was so big. Like when Deshaun Davis was there, he had really good guys in front of him.
Right. But in the past happy era of college football, linebackers need to be able to cover as well too. And those guys are going to have to use their talent in a myriad of ways. So I just think, we got to keep them off the field if we want to keep them fresh here down the stretch. It's going to be really, really difficult if we're losing time of possession. Because as we stated earlier, I don't think it's a good strategy to rotate in and out a bunch of guys at that position. And if you're losing time of possession badly, but what do you do except for have your guys play a bunch of snaps like those games that you described from last year? So definitely not ideal. The thing that I will say though is that if they have to play that many snaps, there is a strong focus on conditioning this offseason. Now, if you've followed any of this offseason, you've probably seen that they run decks every Friday. And they got to the stadium and they run stadiums. And some people, I won't throw any names out there. Some people throw up, some people don't. It's a really tough challenge. And this is appropriate because we're talking linebackers. The teammates have told me that Owen Pappoe runs his decks with a 15-pound vest on.
Nice.
All right. The coaches took notice and they decided to bring vests out for other players. They made it optional to see who would pick up the vest. And a lot of guys picked up the vest. Linebackers picked up the vest. So I feel pretty good about the conditioning if they have to go that many snaps. Yeah. All the work that's done in the offseason is going to mean a lot to whether they can make it through the amount of snaps that you described. Because I'm telling you
earlier though, you talked about the biggest concern for Owen Pappoe, and I agree, it is health. And it's like you can train as much as you want, but it's like if a body or a joint or a muscle doesn't want to cooperate, like it's It doesn't matter. So
well, that's why you train, right? You train to prevent injury. It's not all weightlifting. It's flexibility. It's it's
there's still only so much you can do.
Yeah,
it's still limited.
Oh well, no, Zach. The main point of weight training is to prevent injury, because a lot of these guys are supremely talented anyway. You train to prevent injury. The stronger you are, the more flexible you are. Like they do through. You see a lot of these guys on their own. They'll go through these different kinds of drills that just help prevent injury. So freak accidents happen in football, but I feel good about the fact that they're training as hard as they are, because if there's a chance they're going to avoid injury, whatever percentage they can bring it down, they're going to bring it down by training as hard as they can. Sure. and not half-assing it in the weight room.
So you got Owen as the main guy. Who do you think wins that job next to him?
That's tough. Can you ask me that in a couple weeks? Like outside of him, I just don't. I think it's up in the air outside of him.
I say truly. Cam Riley, and I don't hesitate. I don't hesitate at all with it.
You think so, Cam Riley?
Yeah, I think so.
That's not a bad choice. Man, listen.
And I'll even rank them. I think in likelihood, I would go Cam Riley, Wesley Steiner, then Eugene Asante. No, I'm flipping those. Cam Riley, Eugene Asante, Wesley Steiner. That would be the order that I would put it in as far as likelihood of winning that job.
Oh, man. Let's see here. At linebacker.
I'd love to know what you're looking at right now.
I'm just making sure I could see their faces. I'm going to have to agree with you on Cam Riley. Yeah, I think Cam Riley, not by a lot.
Okay.
Probably would be my choice. And we've heard some great things about him this offseason as well, too. So, yeah, I think Cam Riley, Eugene Asante.
Okay.
Bring in a little experience.
Steiner kind of slips a bit. Is that what you're thinking?
Oh, man. See, I don't know. I love Steiner, though. I love Steiner.
I do, too. I mean, the guy's so athletic. The guy's so talented. But it just takes more than that. And I just think last year with Owen going down, I feel like he should have gotten a bigger role than he did. I think that's telling. And obviously in an off season, you can develop and do what the coaches are asking of you and grow into that player that they want you to be. But he clearly wasn't ready last year, or they would have played him more.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Joko Willis this offseason as well, too.
I think he's moved to edge, though. I don't think he's playing linebacker anymore.
See, I don't know. I think the first few games of this season will tell us a lot. They will tell us a lot. Outside of Owen, most of those positions I think will be under scrutiny. They'll be under the microscope, and guys just have to prove that, number one, the coaching staff is going to be looking for guys they can trust, especially at a place like linebacker, right? Like, you need a guy you can trust at linebacker. You need a kid who's going to take good angles and make sure that running backs don't get to the third level. Right. Depending on the defense, man, once a running back gets to the third level, you're in trouble. So
you're about to give up 6. You got a really solid chance of it. Right.
Yeah. So you need linebackers who, even Zakoby last year, we saw a couple times, man, he took bad angles to the runner. Nobody's immune from it. So even a guy who's as solid a tackler as he was took bad angles at times. And yeah, I think that's what they'll be evaluating here over the first few games. This schedule really is a blessing, man. There's a lot. There's a ton of talent on defense, Zach. And they have a little bit of time to figure it out as the season starts, before we play Penn State and after we play Penn State.
That's kind of what we said. That's kind of what we said last year going to Penn State too. It's like, how much can you learn about yourself before going into Penn State? All right, some recruiting news happened. Auburn missed out on a guy that at one point was seen as an Auburn lock. What happened? What does it mean moving forward? We talk about it in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by Built Bar. They've got a new Built Bar out. It is the Coconut Brownie Chunk Puff. It's delicious. It's absolutely delicious for folks that like coconut in their candy bars. I am not a coconut fan, but it apparently tastes like an Almond Joy, and it's good for you. So if that is one of your favorite types of bars, you need to head over to Built.com right now to check out the Coconut brownie chunk puff. Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off. That is at built.com. Mike G, on Tuesday, we had a live stream from Highland Home High School. Keldric Falk announcing in the school's gym. And he had 4 hats in front of him, the 4 places he took official visits to: the Auburn Tigers, Florida State Seminoles, the Clemson Tigers, and the Florida Gators. And sadly, he put on the Florida State Seminoles hat. This is a bummer, total bummer. This is a guy I think that the Auburn staff and certainly people that cover the team, they all thought that he would be part of Auburn's 2023 class. That is not the case. Him and Brock Glenn, for the longest time, were seen as locks. They officially missed out on Keldrick Falk. And at the time of us recording this, Brock Glenn has not committed anywhere yet, but it seems like it will not be Auburn the longer this goes on. But tough. This was a tough one. This was a tough one to watch and see.
Yeah, so I think it's important for fans to remember that this is going on all around college football right now. Somewhere, someplace, there's a D1 coach who thinks the kid is a lock that's going to commit someplace else. Now, my understanding, in the conversation,
Keldrick thought he was a lock too, though. I mean, I don't think it was a wrong perception. I just think other schools pushed in when it mattered most, and it stinks.
Yeah, listen, I don't know how much NIL played a role. I think that we'll find out over the next few months if there was maybe some sort of NIL pitch that maybe swayed these kids. Recruiting just isn't what it used to be. Now, again, in the conversations that I had, my understanding was that Clemson and Florida State made a really strong last push, just enough to put doubt in his mind. And then Florida State ended up winning out on Tuesday. So, at the end of the day, this recruiting class is always going to be about how Auburn does on the field this season. And guys just haven't seen that yet. So if a coach is negative recruiting, Zach Eason may be getting on my nerves a little bit. If a coach is negative recruiting and not necessarily talking trash, but saying real things that happened this fall, it's fair. I think that there was a public level of dysfunction in the program earlier this year, and coaches are using that to sway some of these kids at the last minute to make them think Auburn is more a roll of the dice than you thought. Come here where our coaching is not in question, like our coach is going to be here. Come to Clemson. Dabo's been here forever, and he's got championships. I don't know if Florida
and
State.
It's funny because I think that makes sense if he goes to Clemson,
right? But Florida State, I was like,
Florida State, I don't think it's that much. I don't think it's a more stable position at all. I think they're probably in the same tier there, which makes me think it's your first point.
Yeah, I think
NIL.
Yeah, we won't hear the stories until later, and this is why we need journalists. We need some journalists to get on it and find out what happened with this kid. Did he get a big NIL deal to sign? What I do think is encouraging. I want to talk about his this from a different standpoint. What is encouraging is that the staff definitely recognizes the importance of recruiting the state of Alabama. This is supposed to be one of the best classes ever. The amount of talent coming out of the state this year is crazy.
Yep.
So the other pickup that we had, Jeremiah Cobb, these Alabama kids have to start choosing Auburn, and they put a push on this, and I think it's good. But the numbers aren't going to wow at this point. I don't think short of us having a better season that we had last season, they were never going to wow at this point. The other thing that people need to keep in mind is that recruiting is not over until like next June. That's the new reality of recruiting.
Yeah, it just depends. Yeah, I mean, or December, but still, that's a long way away.
Yeah. Like, so, yeah, what the results that we see now, I think, are going to be so drastically different from what a class actually ends up like. Texas A&M's super class that they had, I can't wait to see how many of those kids that never played down at Texas A&M transfer out of that program before they played it down to another school. Once they realize, hey, man, I came in with a super class, but there are too many guys in front of me. And if a guy's going to play 3 years, what does that leave for me? And these kids don't have COVID years. So you're back to a place where kids want to play now. And the reality is going to set in for a lot of these guys where they get someplace like Florida State. I just wouldn't be surprised to see a kid like Keldrick get down to Tallahassee and hate it. And completely hate it.
Let's be clear. There's a lot to hate in Tallahassee.
Yeah. Right. And then say, you know what? I want to come back home.
That'd be great.
I want to come back home. I want to play someplace where my parents can easily come see me play. Yep. And I think you'll see that. So this is not, I don't think this is time to panic about recruiting. I really don't. It's really going to come down to what can they put on the field in the fall that gives kids something tangible and gives the coaches something to counter the negative recruiting with.
Right.
So you can say, hey, look at the jump we made from year 1 to year 2. If you get 8 games and you beat at least one team that everybody thinks that you're not going to beat, you have that ammunition to say, hey, we're building something here. Come to Auburn. This is a place where you can grow, and you have to prove that you know what to do with the kids that you have. Year 1, you get a pass. Year 2, you got to get it right.
Mike G, how can people find you, hear you, support you, all that stuff, man?
Real simple. Just going over to YouTube, search the War Rapport. We got lots of things going on over the War Rapport. We had an interview with Keontae Scott. So we got some defensive guys coming in. Our Zach Calzada interview is up. We even got a kicker that's going to talk to you guys here pretty soon. So check out our Building Rapport series.
Sweet. That is Mike G of the War Rapport. You can read all of my written work at auburndaily.com. And we'll be back tomorrow with a little Cruton Thursday with Sports Illustrated's John Garcia. All that and more coming up right here on Locked On Auburn.